Okay, so picture this. Can politicians just wake up tomorrow morning and decide to change the Constitution? Can they simply cross out the rules they don't like, or, I don't know, extend their own power with the stroke of a pen? Think about it like this. Imagine you're watching a football match, and the referee suddenly decides to change the rules right in the middle of the second half, just because one team is losing. Would that be fair? No way, right? Absolutely not. And that exact same logic applies to the highest law of the land. It's a pretty compelling question, and honestly, the answer to who actually holds this power might surprise you.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're focusing on a truly fascinating and absolutely crucial part of Kenya's 2010 Constitution. We're talking about Chapter 16. This is the specific chapter that spells out exactly how the Constitution can, and just as importantly, how it cannot, be amended. We're going to look at the strict rules, the intense procedures, and the specific safeguards that were purposely designed to make sure that this foundational document ultimately belongs to you, the people, and not just the politicians currently sitting in office.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is what we're covering today. First, the rules of the game. Second, 2 paths to change. Third, when citizens must vote. And finally, why make it difficult?
All right, starting things off with Section 1, the rules of the game. Let's get into some constitutional basics.
You know, there's this really common misconception that a constitution is written in stone and can never, ever be altered. But in reality, a constitutional amendment is simply an official change to the highest law of the land. Now, why do we even need this mechanism? Well, because countries evolve. As time marches on, new challenges pop up, society shifts, and sometimes the rules just need to adapt to new realities. But, and this is a big but, we have to remember that we aren't talking about an ordinary law here, like a local traffic regulation or a tax code. This is the supreme law.
Let's think of the Constitution as the foundation of a house. If you own a house, you might repaint the living room walls or swap out the furniture every few years without a second thought. But you absolutely do not casually change the foundation, right? You only make alterations to the foundation with extreme care, heavy planning, and serious consensus, because the entire structure of the country depends on it. If you mess with the foundation carelessly, well, the whole house collapses.
Moving right along to Section 2, 2 paths to change, Parliament versus the people.
Because modifying that foundation is so incredibly critical, the Constitution explicitly dictates that the power to initiate these changes does not rest solely in the hands of elected officials. There are actually 2 distinct avenues. The first is the parliamentary initiative under Article 256. This means a bill is introduced in Parliament, it's debated, and here's the kicker. It has to be passed by a massive 2/3 majority in both houses. That is a very high bar. It requires overwhelming political consensus. But the second path? That's the popular initiative under Article 257. And what's really interesting here is that this bypasses the politicians completely at the starting line. It proves that everyday Kenyans have a direct legal mechanism to actually initiate structural change in their country.
So, let's trace the journey of that popular initiative, because honestly, it is rigorous, but it's also incredibly empowering. First up, everyday citizens must gather at least 1 million signatures from registered voters. 1 million. That is a massive logistical hurdle. Step 2, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, the IEBC, has to thoroughly verify those signatures. If they check out, we hit Step 3. The draft bill goes to all 47 county assemblies. It needs approval from a majority of them, so at least 24 counties must say yes. Finally, Step 4. It heads to Parliament, and if Parliament fails to pass it, or if it touches on certain highly sensitive matters, it goes directly to the people in a referendum. As you can see, it is a long, demanding path from a citizen's idea to a finalized law.
Which brings us to Section 3, when citizens must vote. Let's look at the referendum triggers.
The drafters of the 2010 Constitution were pretty smart. They knew that certain elements of the country's foundation were so monumental, so incredibly vital to the nation's identity and freedom, that Parliament is legally barred from deciding on them alone. And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate safeguard. Under Article 255, if an amendment touches on specific triggers, a national referendum is absolutely mandatory. We are talking about the supremacy of the Constitution itself, the sovereignty of the people, your Bill of Rights, the term of office for the president, the structure of devolved government. You literally cannot have politicians deciding behind closed doors to extend presidential terms or to alter your fundamental human rights. For these issues, the power gets pulled right out of the politician's hands and dropped directly into the ballot box. You, the citizen, must have the final say.
But wait, it's not just a simple majority of whoever decides to show up on voting day.
The Constitution demands broad national engagement. For a referendum to pass, at least 20% of the registered voters in at least half of the counties must participate. To put that into perspective, you need significant voter turnout spreading across at least 24 counties, plus a simple majority of citizens actually voting in favor. It's a strict mathematical threshold, and it's designed specifically to ensure that a small, highly vocal minority can not just force a foundational change on the rest of the nation.
Finally, let's wrap up with Section 4. Why make it difficult? Protecting the future.
So, the crucial point is, why put up all these hurdles? The millions of signatures, the massive voting thresholds, just to update a legal document? Well, because if we made the Constitution easy to change, we open the door to immense risk. Leaders could just alter the rules for personal gain, extend their own power, or weaken citizens' rights whenever it suited them. By making it extremely strict to change the Constitution, it acts like a shield. It protects democratic safeguards, it secures the structural integrity of the nation, and ensures that the country is protected for the next generation. The difficulty: it isn't a bug in the system, it is absolutely the ultimate feature.
All right, we've covered the strict rules, the dual pathways of parliament and popular initiative, and the monumental triggers that put the power right back in your hands. At the end of the day, the Constitution of Kenya isn't just some dusty book sitting on a shelf in a government office. It is your rule book. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to reflect on. Knowing that the ultimate power over the foundational rules of your country lies in your hands, if a referendum regarding one of these core rights was held tomorrow, would you show up and vote? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, keep asking the big questions.